Okay. So I'm going to talk about building better inspectors. So let's start with a basic question. Why do you need better inspectors? So you need better inspectors because they provide you with basically a better development experience for anybody who is using your stuff. So if you at some point decide to create something and actually share it with other people instead of just putting it in your somewhere in your closet or I don't know and just never share it with anybody ever again and everybody's just like, please give it to us, and you actually give it to them, you want an inspector to be actually usable by people, right? You want it to be nice looking, it want to be easy to use. You don't want it to be the default Udon inspector where you can't see what elements are in the array. Sorry everybody who is working on that, but I'm hoping that it will improve at some point. So another good thing about building custom inspectors is the fact that you can make any kind of automation you want. So if you want to drag and drop something and it to populate 10,000 fields, you can ask FaceDragon. He just took that and ran with it, and he just populates like thousands and thousands of entries in arrays by just dragging and dropping a thing. So there is that. You can automate anything you want, and it just looks plain better, which is like, wow, it looks better. So yeah, this is a very, 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 very over-the-top example of what can you build. It has reactive fields, it has conditional help messages, it has custom array rendering with reordering and drag and drop, because I really wanted a drag and drop, so I added it the other day. So it has custom lookups for things like pop-ups, so you can have a list of Udon behavior events or shader properties or animator triggers or any kind of data you want. It can all be included in there. This might look like a lot. And it actually is quite a bit. You would probably never want anything that looks as complex as this because, well, it's just too much to deal with and it looks overwhelming. And at that point, it's already not a good inspector. It just, I guess, a pretty one maybe? I don't know. That's also subjective. So that was a lot. Let's step back and look at it a bit of a more top-level overview. So why did I even decide to talk about this? It all started with me just looking at Udon Inspector and wanting something better, something more usable by other people, something more usable by people who are used to normal Unity development, or just by your person who used to VRChat triggers and now he has Udon and he doesn't understand anything. So I decided to build a system that makes it easy for those people to understand what Udon is, and a system that also allows the creators to build things easily understandable by normal users and do it fast. So that's how Udon Toolkit was born, which is built on Unity property drawer system, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And on top of that, it implements something that's you can call a stackable property drawer system. So that's the whole base of what I was building and how I built it. So what we'll go in this talk through is we'll go and talk about what are property drawers, how Unity draws all your fields, how does it choose, which method to use to draw your thing, and how to create your own custom drawers, and how it all comes together in the end, and why it's all can be useful to you in your next project. So we'll start with the basics because you need to know some level, lower level things to understand what's going on, and we'll start with attributes. So C# has a cool thing called attributes. There is a MDN description over there, TLDR, if you can basically attach any data to any field or method or anything in your, or property in your script. In terms of UdonSharp, that means you can add it to your property, so your public or private field, and you can add any kind of information, text, numbers. In plain C# you can add much more, but we'll focus on mostly just text and numbers and booleans and things like that. So here is an example of a thing like that. So if you can't see from here, click both triggers, you get your screen, you can see the code better. But generally speaking, the attribute consists of a couple parts when you make your own. It's funny, you need to use an attribute to make an attribute. So the attribute is this part on top, which says, hey, you can use this one on the field, a class that inherits of an attribute, and anything you want actually in the constructor. The attribute can be how complex, as complex as you want, or as simple as you want. You can add any kind of variables, any kind of constructors that generate, that populate those variables, and then you can fetch all that data back in your editor scripts, and you can have as many of them as you want on your field, as long as Unity doesn't like slow to a crawl. So that was all great and code, but how does it help us actually draw properties in the Unity editor? So we'll look at what Unity gives us. Unity has some built-in things that you might have used, either if you do shaders, or if you do UdonSharp, or if you ever touched Unity directly. Like it has things like headers and range and spaces and tooltips. Tooltips are generally considered to be the most useful of them because it allows you to add some extra helpful information to any field you have, just any random text. The issue is that people don't read, and people also don't know that you can hover over a thing and it will tell you like something helpful. So tooltips are great, but what's their purpose if nobody reads them because nobody knows that they're there? So we can build the much better ones by doing custom stuff. So here I'm just trying to get a bit into like what are we going to talk about now. So what we'll touch on now is property drawers. This slide, I guess it might get a bit confusing, but I'll try to explain everything. So basically, we have your C# attributes, which is just things in square brackets, which we just showed before. And we have our property attributes and property drawers, which are two interconnected things of the same system. The attributes tell us what kind of editor to use, and the property drawers tell us how to draw that particular editor. Property drawers obviously can only draw properties. You cannot tell to draw something for a method or anything else. It's only obviously works if the field is drawn in the inspector, and it has to implement the GUI method to actually, draw something, because otherwise you're not drawing anything. So how it all gets into UdonSharp, because Merlin is amazing. He gave us all the tools we need for this kind of stuff. So there is a link that everybody who tries to make custom inspectors seems to miss, because like, hey, can you make custom editors? Yes, you can actually go to the wiki and it tells you everything. So you can basically just take Merlin's default custom inspector thing, and that will allow you to use anything Unity gives you right there without anything else. Just take the default, plug it in, and you can basically create your own property inspectors as much as you want. There is one caveat, at least the last time I checked, maybe Merlin can correct me on that, but if you try to do things like this, where you make an operation like add things together, or subtract them, or add two numbers, or any kind of other thing, it just will not compile for you. So that's the limitation of the current setup. So if anything there changed, I guess we'll touch on that in questions, but so for now, just know that you can only use direct values. So this might be very confusing, so we'll try to go on an actual example to see how do you build one of those things, and how do you build something actually useful. So we'll go with a very basic thing that I use literally everywhere in all of my projects, is a help box. Because it's like a tooltip, but better, because you can actually see what it says instead of like trying to tell people to hover on something. So here you can see it consists of two types. The attribute, which is the exact C# thing we talked about before, which is basically just tells Unity, hey, you see this property, draw it with like an editor for this attribute. And then there is the actual drawing code. So if you ever did any editor scripting, this will all look pretty familiar to you. There is editor GUI, methods, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, and basically we tell Unity with this special attribute custom property drawer, like, hey, if you see this attribute, use this property drawer to draw your thing. And that's basically it. Unity will then call your own GUI method, and will hope that everything you did actually works and actually doesn't break the layout. And if it does, it will break the layout. There is no training wheels there. Just whatever you tell it to draw, it will do. There is like one thing that I would like to mention here directly is if you ever want to change a height of a thing, which we exactly is what we want to do, you want to actually tell Unity, hey, when you want to calculate the height of this, please use our custom method with like an extra offset. In this case, we had 20 pixels to add one line of text, which is 20 pixels is roughly one line of a property in Unity. You can actually do it dynamically, but I just mostly hard-coded like that because 2019 breaks everything. So, we'll have to redo everything anyways. So yeah, in this example, we just draw our property, we shift it all by 20 pixels down, and then we add hello TLX code. And what it creates is this kind of thing. So now we have a hello TLX help box, which hopefully you can see behind me, instead of being a tooltip that you have to hover for. So to recap, we just create an attribute, which is just an empty thing that tells Unity use this. We have a property drawer that tells what to draw, and that's it. You attach it on top of your thing, like a public variable of sorts. You just put it on, and it just works out of the box. Unity does it all for you, and it's a very nicely built system until you hit some very annoying limitations, which are this. You can only have one of those on anything. And that's a giant issue. And why is that a problem? So the problem is when you start building it, everything looks great. You're just like, oh, I'm adding my help box. But then you're like, oh, I want my help box and I want it to be a slider. And then I want the text to be bold. And then I also want it to be pink because pink is cool. So this issue comes up very fast when you try to build a big system and you instantly realize that, hey, how do I actually do that? And you go to Unity forums and everybody's telling you, oh, wow, that's very unintuitive that you cannot add many of those things or stack them together in a nice way that Unity already provides. So you go to Unity forums and you find this cool thread, which I'm not expecting anybody to read. There will be a full link, but which I basically just took the code and put it in. This is exactly a piece of code from Udon Toolkit on the top of my editor class, which just basically says like, hey, this is stolen from there. And that approach, which was proposed by some very good random person on the internet, is to create a system of stackable things, which basically takes the concept which we already went through, having an attribute and a drawing thing, and builds upon it. So instead of just having a thing that draws, so a base property drawer and an attribute that says, hey, just draw this, we have a different setup where we have a base, which is what draws stuff, and we have a modifier, which is the attribute that tells, draw this in this particular way or in that particular way. So in this case, like we can think about it like we have a thing that says draw a slider, and then we have another thing that tells draw a slider but with an offset on top, a message below, and of this particular height, and if this condition is met, please hide it. So that's the general gist of it. So you have your modifier and you have your modifiable base. So I guess we solved the issue, right? And I guess because of the slide is here, it's obviously not a full solution. You still are limited to having one base. So if in case where you want a slider and also modify that slider in some particular way, you can't really do that because you already drew your slider. So you're still limited by that, but you can build any kind of UI above, below, and modify anything in between very quickly and very easily just by adding more and more modifiers that call things above and below your code. So for most people who are not trying to build a toolkit-like system, who are not trying to build a custom Odin inspector, but for Udon, which is basically exactly what I'm doing, they can just use this kind of system, which is really simple. There will be a link under the video. You can just copy-paste that code and it will just work, and you can customize any of your inspectors with anything, and it will probably be just good enough for any of your stuff. So we'll go through an example, which will look basically exactly like the last one I shown. Instead of the empty attribute now, we have a bit more stuff because we now pass a method name to our attribute. So here we define our attribute, and instead of property attribute, we have a custom class now, which is called property modifier attribute. I'm not going to show the base class, but it's like 15 lines. Again, you can check out the specific example online. And we just take the method name and just save it to a public variable so we can use it later. And then the actual cool part of it all, we can now now have a getHeight method inside that attribute instead of having it in a base class, which means that every attribute that you add on top, every modifier can say, increase the height, decrease the height, set the height to 0, hide the thing, show the thing. So whenever anything is like you want to, like in this case, we want to hide something, we tell, hey, check that method and see what that method returns, which here is a utility. I'll touch upon this later. If the method says that the property should be visible, return true, or false if it shouldn't. And the actual actual drawer is just a base class, because the drawer itself, the thing that you can copy paste, will take care of the rest, take care of the actually displaying a thing. And if you want to modify, you want to modify the base UI, you can add it here. There are examples, but if you just want to add things above or below, you don't even need to do that. It will all be handled for you. So in the code, in the actual code, it will look like this. So you have your Hidelf with a method name, and here you have your base property. So instead of one attribute, you now have two, because we are not using Unity standard system. And basically we tell, hey, look at this Boolean, and based on that, show or hide this field. And that's it. There is a utility class, as I said, which basically allows this whole thing to work. Which this is like, hey, grab this Boolean, but like I don't want to get into like reflection and all that here. But basically, all it does, it just looks at your class and looks at this property name and finds it on the class and sees if it's true or false, and that's about it. So now I talked about all of this, and it's probably mighty confusing. I'm gonna switch a bit to Udon Toolkit and why I started talking about all of this, because as I said, Udon Toolkit is built on all of it. So Udon Toolkit is basically all of that, but already built for you, already implementing a lot of classic things that people requested. It can do headers, helpers, you can like hide things conditionally, you can track if things change, you can stack things together in horizontal groups, or make your fake dictionaries, because we can't have those in Udon, but we can have list views, which is basically a fake way to get two arrays to always match in size and allow you to have things on one side and the other to be logically connected. So I just took that concept of stackable properties and built a lot of things on top, and you can just use that because it's free. So here are some examples. So like, if you ever wanted a pop-up in Udon and you're like, oh, we can't use enums because we can't, because VRChat doesn't allow that. So here I have basically the same thing that you would use an enum for, but it's just a string with a list of options. So in this case, it just takes all the events from a behavior and just allows you to select from the list, which is very helpful when working on some projects like Submerge and on my own personal stuff. I even taught Rubik how to use the system, and he was able to work on that. And Fins as well was able to figure those out. So seems to be working as a easy to use tool. So there are headers that allow you to better separate things visually instead of just being like a bolded uppercase text. It creates like a nice background and stuff, which makes it much easier to navigate like a 100 public variable object in your scene. And there are list views, which is personally the most used thing for me. Basically everything in this world uses a list view of sorts. I think this whole world is like 50 or 60 behaviors, and all of them use some kind of that kind of system, which allows me to add two things that are connected and they look like they are part of the same, while internally they are two different things. But you can always rely on them having the same length, so it's safe for you to assume if we can call, if we get this value, we can get the same value on the same index on the other array. So, and why I build all of this is because, as I said, I wanted to build better inspectors, but I didn't want to build them like one by one, because the common thing, if you ever built anything in Unity, like any custom editor in Unity, common thing people do is they make a custom editor for each of their things, which is very slow and hard to maintain. like if you look even at UdonSharp docs, the common way is to create an editor and say, hey, please be an editor for this particular script, which is great. But when you try to build a complex thing, when you try to make everything look good, you want something more scalable where you can add and remove things as you go, and they are easily composable, and it's way easier to document a thing that's like all modular and connects together in one nice way. So that's the whole reasoning. So how do you actually use this? It's exactly the same as you've seen before. There is nothing special about it, but the only difference is that for Udon Toolkit in particular, you need to define your default editor in UdonSharp, because as much as I would like to keep everything modular, Unity doesn't allow you to do one thing. It doesn't allow you to create a custom array editor without overriding everything. So I ended up overriding everything, and thankfully Merlin added a way to do that, because otherwise I would have had to define it every time one by one, which is very annoying to do. And yeah, so thank God we can do this. And then you can just start adding attributes. So as you saw before, we had a pop-up. All you had to do is just say, hey, make a pop-up, and use this variable, role names, to populate the pop-up options, which is literally the zone I'm standing in right now. This is the script on it. This is a stage zone, and it has a list of roles and a pop-up that allows you to define which roles I'll allow to enter and allow to get voice overrides, which is the basic example of how you can use a pop-up like this. So everything is documented. I take pride in my documentation. Everything is documented in code, and everything is documented on the wiki. Every single property, usage examples, anything you want. Nobody reads this, it seems, but hey, if anybody wants, there is all the information. I also try to provide inline comments for things like, why is this here and why are we doing this? Because Unity inspectors get kind of confusing in some cases. And the best part, you can extend all of this. I think FaZe was interested in looking into extending Udon Toolkit's base things. So the good news is you already know everything you need to extend it. So all you do is just the same thing. You just take your stackable property, modifiable property, your property modifier, and you put them together. And there will be a documentation page exactly explaining step by step how to do that soon, basically right after the TLX, on like basically summarizing the stock into one page of documentation that allows you to expand all of it. But technically speaking, you can build any native Unity or stackable property drawer, and it will be supported by Udon Toolkit, and it will be enhanced by Udon Toolkit's array editor and drag and drop and all of the things that it provides. And the good part is that you can even build your own custom inspectors for particular scripts. Like some cases, you don't want one universal thing, you want something specific. Like you want a thing that draws lines to everything, or in the scene while you work on it, or you want a thing that places a bunch of spheres all the way around, marking the spots. If it's like, I don't know, a teleporter that moves things around, I don't know. You can have a lot of reasons why you want to implement custom scene UI, and in that case, you can just create your custom editor using this attribute on top, which is explained in UdonSharp wiki. And you can inherit from UT editor. And then in that case, you get all the benefits of having Udon Toolkit's editor, and you also can add your own stuff. And the best part is, if you want to modify the actual editor, so like the thing that draws your properties, but you only want to add something on top or above, below, or after, or add additional processing, you can just call the base method after overriding it, and you can just add things. And I will handle undo, redo, like all those things for you. You can just grab your properties and just use them directly, and it will all be saved and handled, which is, I think, is a nice plus. So it's really hard to shoot yourself in the foot, which is kind of the point of the toolkit. If you're going to embark on that, please look at the attributes and custom UI sample, which was the script for that scary video at the beginning where everything was toggleable, switchable, and clickable. That's where all that is. It's basically a giant reference sheet right in the code. And please don't be afraid to ask myself for help. Like in Unity General channel, this is basically one of the channels that I really like monitor most actively on prefabs, because that's kind of what I do day to day most of the time. And if you have any particular questions about Udon Toolkit, you can join my Discord. I don't have a plug here because I was kind of rushing this talk. So there is no plug for my Discord, but I think it's fairly easy to find, where you can ask particular questions about the toolkit. So now that we've talked about all of this, there is one thing that I want to talk about, is where it's gonna go. So if not for this event, basically I was supposed to be doing all of the things that I'm gonna show right now. But because we are here, I'm just gonna talk about them. So as much as I like property drawers, I already said that they're not perfect. They are still limited to one thing. They're still calling internal Unity things. They're still limited by those boundaries. So what I'm doing right now is I'm completely rewriting everything from scratch to have everything cached, everything to be so that already made things much faster, because I wasn't really efficient and I wasn't really know what I was doing when I was first writing things. And the new system allows you to extend things much easier. You don't need to figure out anything like modifiers or drawers or whatever. There is no difference between any of this. You just create a class, set an attribute, say this should draw fields with this attribute, and that's it. That in there you can define anything you want. You can define any kind of UI before or after the field, change the height, change the base colors. The colors are embedded in this thing, so you don't need to guess like which is the pro theme or the normal theme of Unity. All of that kind of stuff is already built in. And if you ever used Odin Inspector, it's basically trying to borrow from that even more than it does now in terms of general inspiration. So it has more extensibility than it does now, and hopefully it all works out. So yeah, I think that's about it. Kind of rushed because we were late on time, so hopefully that wasn't too confusing. So my main hope is if you didn't understand anything, you at least will look at editor inspectors when you see a custom one, and you will appreciate how much work goes into those things. And if you got interested in trying your own, I'm very very glad for that, and I think that's the main goal of the whole talk. So yeah, my name is orels1. If any questions, you can ask them right there, and thanks for coming to my TLX talk. Ooh. 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 Let me open the Q&A zone.
Wow, I got none of that.
Yeah, the thing with adding together strings and doing that stuff is going to be supported at some point, but it's deceivingly complex. So it'll be a few. But yeah.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Yeah, so you mentioned that you're going to be rewriting a lot, you're going to be rewriting a lot of stuff. Is that going to conflict with also giving people the option to extend your classes?
It shouldn't. The old system will probably stay in there. Like, I currently still have support for the old controllers kind of setup, and I will think I'll deprecate those and I move the current system into the legacy, because they shouldn't conflict. It will basically be a new editor, at least for some time. So the main difference would be you will switch from Udon Toolkit to Udon Toolkit 2.0 or whatever on 1.0, and that will be a different editor. But they shouldn't conflict. I don't know about putting them together. I'll need to look into that, but they'll probably still be supported, because I can still basically just grab all the methods you have and call them directly from the new system. So it will just be like, it will be less nice. But you shouldn't be worried about things breaking by trying to extend it now. I'll do my best, because I already have a lot of system myself. I don't want to break them, right? I want to still support those. So yeah, nothing you do now or extend now should break. You will just maybe not have access to all the cool new things without doing some updates, which is to be expected with, full rewrites. So yeah, hopefully that answers that.
Cool.
You said that one of your hopes of the talk is that it gets people into looking into Unity inspectors. If someone wanted to get into it, obviously you need a general C# knowledge, but are there any other things you would recommend people look into before diving into Unity inspectors?
Honestly, I generally tell everybody to start with just making an editor window. That's like the starting point. You Google making editor window in Unity and literally go through the docs. Surprisingly, those docs kind of guide you fairly well to create a new one. And from there, basically, I approach it as very practically, any kind of learning like that. I approach it in a way like, hey, what is like annoying you with day to day? What is the thing that you're trying to do every day? So, and you have to do it manually. So I always advise take that, Google editor windows in Unity, and just try to implement automation for that, like creating a recently people ask me like, hey, can you build a thing that creates a plane with an image right in front of you, so you don't have to create a material, add an image, and do it all manually, place a quad and format it to the size of an image. So that was a good example. I just made an editor window that did that for me, and it touched up on all the basics of Unity UI. So you, at that point, you already kind of know what's going on, and you are at that point able to start looking into all of this. So I would say start with the things that are your day-to-day and look into the default documentation. And after that, you can start looking in Udon Toolkit guides and UdonSharp guides, and probably you will find your way around them.
Cool.
I'd like to thank you for hosting this event.
Thank you.
I second that. Thank you.
Third.